All right, we're good.
Check in 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
We're plugged in. We're live. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. All right, welcome everyone. We have a very special presentation today. Well, not much of a presentation. We're gonna have a conversation,
Exactly.
about our very special guest. So. We have the great privilege to host Dr. Kenneth Redcross. Let's give him a round of applause
Thank
for
you.
joining
Thank
us
you.
today.
Thank you, guys.
And we don't have a formal presentation
Yeah.
put together. Instead, we're just going to have an informal conversation. I'll take my
Sure.
seat. So why don't we just start with just giving us a quick background of who you are and a little bit about your experience.
Sure. So, what's interesting, guys, is that I'm one of those. So I'm a physician, a practicing doctor. I'm a concierge physician. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do this after Marisol asked me is because it's so beautiful how my career has kind of evolved, I should say, into entrepreneurship. So I've been practicing for like over 20 years now. And one of the things I noticed when I started my practice is that healthcare started to change a lot. You guys don't know me yet, but I'm an only child, and I love to talk. I mean, I'm already talking with the baseball guys here about the Mets game tonight. But I started to realize that within healthcare, things were changing in the sense that it wasn't so much of a focus on the patient. And so when I first started my career, it took me a while to kind of understand, why didn't I feel fulfilled? Why was I in the room with the patient, but it felt like I couldn't give enough because I was being rushed? And that's kind of where my entrepreneurship journey kind of started, unbeknown to me.
Okay, and then where did that take you? So you identify, I guess, that there's a disconnect between with the doctor-patient relationship, and I guess you saw an opportunity there, or how did that translate into entrepreneurial?
As with so many businesses, and some of you I know are learning about entrepreneurship or already know about entrepreneurship, but as with entrepreneurship, so much of it comes out of need.
Yep.
I mean, we talk about certain things in business. Are you a painkiller or you're a vitamin? I kind of am in both. I'm killing pain. Well, literally, I'm killing pain, but also as far as pain in that relationship. For me, it started, I trained here in New York many moons ago at Columbia in the city. And from there, I knew I wanted to work with the underserved, and I went out to California. I worked with migrant Mexican farm workers in the strawberry fields. Did that for 4 years, and then after that, I flipped to Beverly Hills. You guys may have heard of Beverly Hills. And when I went there, I started to realize that it didn't matter where I was, whether I was with the migrant Mexican farm workers or whether I was in Beverly Hills, the same challenges were there. Once again, patience, you guys at some point, look, there's another thing I should say. One thing that's going to unite all of us, we're in the middle of election time, so it doesn't matter what side you're on. There's one thing that's going to unite all of us. We're all going to be a patient at some point.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
No matter what, blue or red. Look, I'm independent, guys, so I don't really care. But my point is that how is that relationship for us? Because I know that I can help you live longer. I know it. But I can't do that if I feel like the healthcare system is rushing me. Mm-hmm. If the healthcare system is treating you guys like a number. Mm-hmm. And so I started to recognize, even though here I am in Beverly Hills, and they're just as unhappy as it was when I was in a different part of California.
Interesting. And so they're unhappy. Obviously, people are going to be unhappy if they're unhealthy.
Right.
But were there any differences between those communities about the kinds of health challenges that they faced, or the challenges that they face in accessing healthcare? Or
yeah, look, you hear a lot nowadays about healthcare disparities. Obviously, the resources were very different in those two locations. But when I realized that I wanted to do more, but I didn't know how to do more, I didn't know how to scale myself, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's only one Dr. Redcross. How could I make sure I touch people in other ways? Mm-hmm. It was one day I was in my office. A young lady came in, and she was a production assistant for a big-time movie producer in Beverly Hills. And she's like, I'm so frustrated. I was like, why? She's like, my boss is trying to get this movie done on a lot of Universal Studios, but he doesn't have time. He's sick, and he can't see a doctor. This is 2007, guys, so I'm dating myself, all right? And I said, tell him I'll come see him. So after work, after I saw my 30 to 40 patients for the day, once again, not happy because I'm not getting into the soul of the patient, I went on a lot of Universal. I never forget, guys, it was all these cubicles, just like a room like this. I have my stethoscope and a prescription pad. And everyone's looking at me in the cubicle like, what is going on here?
Yeah.
So I went back there to see this producer. He's like, who are you? I'm like, well, I'm the doc. Your production assistant sent me, said you weren't feeling well. He was like, oh, I just have a bronchitis. I know what I need. I just need a little bit of this antibiotic, whatever. So I write the prescription, take a listen to him. He sounds good. He's like, all right, doc, what do I owe you? And guys, I swear, I was like, $100? I had no idea because I was used to being in the office.
Yeah, yeah.
And he says, $100? So he's like, are you kidding me? So he writes me this huge check. A model was born.
Yeah.
A model was born because you know why? Not only was he elated, but I was elated. Not because of the huge check, which was nice, but I was elated because he was happy.
Yeah.
He got what he deserved in that particular interaction. And then I started to say, would people pay me cash, especially on the entertainment side of things, to come to them and give them three things really: access, convenience, and time? Would they pay me for that? And that's where kind of my first business, or one of my first businesses, was actually born.
Okay, yeah. So you've noticed there's a distance within medicine between the paying customer and the service that's being provided, right? Because it takes this circuitous route, right?
Yeah.
You give them you don't give them a check necessarily. You give them like an insurance card. There might be a copay. You don't really understand it. You don't know how much anyone's getting paid because this massive institution sort of takes care. And so it's very different than going to, a restaurant where you know exactly what the bill is, and, when you have that personal relationship with the payments that you're making, it breeds a different kind of dynamic, which doesn't exist within medicine. And so you identify, right, that maybe, patients aren't getting the exact kind of services that they need. And this, I guess, prompts an opportunity in your mind.
It really did, because when I realized that people were willing to pay for that, I started to, at that time, I was one of the only young internists, especially African-American internists in Beverly Hills at the time. So I started to get a lot of entertainers that would say, hey, is this cool young guy? He's like us. He doesn't care what we do. The first patient I had, this isn't HIPAA, was on Grey's Anatomy. And my nurses were going berserk. I didn't know who he was. And the point is, he thought that was cool that I didn't care. I was like, dude, I'm just here to make you healthy and happy. And the next thing you know, there's not too many Dr. Redcrosses in the world. So my name is getting put around. And then the next thing you know, I have entertainers and athletes and everyone. But the challenge for me was, with entrepreneurial part of it, was that I'm in an office, everyone. So when you're going to see your doctor, as you mentioned, Jeff, you're actually getting a copay. It's not a business for me. Right? It's a business for the big conglomerate that's rushing all of you through at some point one day. I hope not. And so that's when I started to say that I can do it a different way on my own.
Yeah. And then what was that? What does that way look like?
Oh, gosh, guys. So one of the things I'll say, and this is interesting because I know a lot of you guys are younger, and thank God a lot of you probably don't have some of the challenges you get as you get older: diabetes, high blood pressure, heart failure, and that sort of thing. But believe me, at some point, you guys will want to lean on your doctor, whether it's for the athletes here, for your performance, or whether it's for some of you who are like, I may have COVID, but I need to have a doc I can really have a talk to. I'm feeling a little bit down after the isolation. So even though you're a younger population, the doctor-patient relationship is still very, very important to you. And so one of the things I always say, which is important, and especially for a lot of you who already know you want to be an entrepreneur, is that it takes a long time to be an overnight sensation. It's about that patience piece. It's about being told no. It's about understanding you're going to hear no a million more times than that yes, and be okay with that. And not really internalize that to say your vision doesn't exist. Because my vision, so this vision, everyone, before these practices came, this is concierge medicine. I'm a concierge doc. And so that was something that, get out of here. I'm going to use my copay. Why would I pay this guy cash? Why would I do that? Well, you get an hour with me. You don't get, on average, 7.5 minutes with me, as most patients do with their doctor. And then that sort of thing. So if you fast forward from 2007 and now, guys, now they're all over the place. Now they're in Greenwich. Now they're here. Now there's these big groups who are like, yeah, this model actually does work.
Yeah, I mean, well, we teach in innovation. One way that you can innovate is increasing accessibility.
Yep.
Right? And there's so many products that exist out there,
Yeah.
but people don't have the accessibility that they desire. And that could be, the introduction of innovation. And so you identify that, right? You identify that as a potential need. And it could be that simple,
Yeah.
right? You didn't invent a new cure to something, right? It
Nope.
was just a simple way of delivering greater value
There you go.
to a customer where it was lacking. And then so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of innovation just in these sort of simple ideas. Like even like they have these medical pods. I don't know what to call them,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like a tech pod. You walk in, it's got all the diagnostic
Oh, yeah.
tools
Oh,
that,
yeah.
that sort of automate like a
Yeah.
lot of that first like introduction that you might go through when you first meet a doctor.
Right.
There's these kinds of innovations. I don't know. You had a reaction to it. I don't know.
So, okay, so that's really, that sort of thing is set up for all of you in here.
Yeah.
They think that's what you guys want. And I think you'll kind of say at first, hey, it's kind of cool, the tech. But nothing is better than like pressing the flesh, right? Being able to talk like this and say, look, man, look, to be real, what's going on? What are you, that machine is not doing that. It's going to give you some diagnosis. You're going to get a blood test. You're going to get all that. But none of that matters if you don't really have that relationship to say, all right, doc, what does this mean for me? Because I talked to my boy and he has this particular result. He says it's not a big deal. Is that true? And so one of the other things that I think really resonated for my brand is the fact that I'm so big on the EQ aspect of it. Look, I was blessed to train at Columbia. I have the IQ medicine stuff all down. It's the EQ part which really comes from your soul. It comes from what your vision is, what you feel like your calling is. I was fortunate. I was fortunate to realize what my calling was early in life. But I also learned even more so when I realized that a lot of people who are sitting in front of me, I can't make better because I don't have enough time to do so. And if it's just me in that room, what about everyone else in America or whatever? In fact, I have patients in Spain. I have patients in Canada, all over where healthcare is a challenge and where people find value in that connection, especially on the EQ side of things, especially after the pandemic, where some mental health challenges are even more important to really talk about, where you need even more time with your doctor and that sort of thing within the healthcare aspects.
Yeah. So you mentioned this emotional intelligence, the ability to make a connection with the patient. We preach here the value of the design thinking process, where the first step is establishing empathy with your customer. Before you can deliver value, you need to understand fully what value they're looking for.
True.
And often, entrepreneurs can make the mistake of coming up with a technology and you have a solution looking for a problem.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
problem that exists. And so probably what's happening with these medical pods, right, is that someone created this brilliant sort of technological, piece of machinery.
Yeah.
But it's ultimately lacking probably what patients truly need, right? There's not a lack of technology,
Right. Right.
With patients. There's a lack of that sort of connection that they're making with their doctors. And this is born out of the emotional intelligence to understand, right, how to make that connection. And you said something interesting because, for many people, this doesn't come naturally. It's not easy. This is a skill that you develop. But you said a lot of this comes from the passion you have for what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
how does that translate into an increase in this emotional intelligence ability to connect?
Look, so I think that's one of the most important things. Number one, something you said that is huge is you're right. Sometimes you feel like you come up with these great ideas and you're like, oh, this is the best thing going, but you're right. Maybe it's not a problem for that many.
Yeah.
Maybe it isn't. So that comes to listening to your audience, knowing your target audience, where you think you should be. The other thing, when you talk about passion, everyone, it is so palpable when you really have it. Sometimes you also have to look inside and say, some of these things that I like, but am I really passionate about that? And I promise, if you can really step back and really decide if there's really a passion there. It's really the difference between success and I'll say not success or not as successful as you can be. Because when you really feel like you're passionate about something, the other person on the other side, as I say, on the other side of the stethoscope for me, knows like, no, we're connected. I mean, even tonight with you guys, I mean, I see all of you out here. As far as I'm concerned, we are all connected tonight. When we're done, and you guys say, hey, doc, I had a little of this on my knee, or I had this when I had some stomach ache. Like, as far as I'm concerned, I am here to get into the soul of all of you out there now to make your life better. But I mean it. And I think if any of you mean it or actually talk to me, you'll be able to feel what it is I'm talking about. It's because I know why I was born. I know why I was put here. And so it's important that I share that. And so when I'm able to do it in even forums like this or in front of a patient, it's really important that for me, that's one of my proficiencies, right? That's one of my skill sets that I know. And it's connection and communication because I enjoy the energy of the other person right across from me.
What was the process like identifying that for yourself? Like, how can somebody find their passions? They're exposed to so many things, and maybe they're just not excited about it.
Well, you know, that's a great question. And so that's an interesting question. The reason why I say this, everyone, is because it happens differently for certain people. You'll hear some people will say, you know, I decided to focus on this because my child had was diagnosed with a certain disease, and it became a passion for them. Or you hear someone say, like, you know, this is something I was doing for life, and it was something I figured needed to be made. For me, it was a little bit of a medical challenge. So when I went out to California, I had that business. I started my concierge practice, but I also started, you guys may have heard of Minute Clinic and those things, or the ones in the city now, City MDs. So I started one of those with a partner before they were in vogue, because I thought, once again, it was another way. I had one, I was in LA. My business was up in Sacramento. I would fly every day, every week, I should say rather, to Sacramento to meet my partner and do that, which is bananas, guys. I mean, it was crazy, but I'm a business guy, right? This is what we do. We don't care about that. And so I was going and I was going. And so long story short, I ended up going one time to the emergency room because I wasn't feeling so hot. I hadn't eaten that week. And I was like, look, I know what I have. I probably just have a pneumonia. Give me an x-ray. Let me get up to Sacramento. Come back, x-ray negative. It comes back, my EKG says that I had an acute heart attack. I'm in the 30s. Like, get out of here. I work out every day. I'm a CrossFitter. Go back. Do it again. Says acute heart attack. So they go and they check that. And so they do what's called a cardiac catheterization, guys. They put a little catheter here and they look at your arteries to make sure they're open. So my arteries were all open. I had a syndrome that was called Takasobu's. That syndrome is only when you're at a high S-word state, stress. I always call it the S-word. I don't give stress power, so I call it the S-word. But I had a high stress state where here I am running all around, running to Sacramento, flying here and there in this high state when I'm running this business. And I was off the field, or actually say to you guys, off the baseball diamond for a couple of months, thinking, what is life about? Like, what am I really doing? And so that was the time when I started all of this, guys. So that was my aha moment. It was unfortunately a case that could have been with Dr. Redcross not being here if I hadn't stopped in the ER. But that was the moment when I said, you know, it's not about me. It's not about my businesses. It's about all of you today. It's about all of my patients. That's what I'm supposed to do. And so from there, that's when I totally evolved everything. I started thinking about letting other patients know. Here I am, a physician, and I can't get some of the answers that I want, or I can't get through to some docs for concerns that I have. And I say, what does everyone else do and feel like if they don't have a me in their corner? And that's when I wrote my first book called Bond, which is about the importance of the patient-doctor bond. And I started to do that when I was off the field for a while, and that was the impetus for me to say, I know what my calling is.
Wow, really interesting. I mean, you know, we don't know how the universe works exactly, but it seems like this moment was a special moment that really, like, forged what seems to resonate most with you. It's like, you know, this is part of the cards that you needed to be dealt. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely did.
So, but there's also an interpretation that you made from your perspective. This was something that made you better, right? But that only comes from a place of resiliency, right? It could
Yeah.
have done the opposite. It could have destroyed you,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Could you speak to maybe the resiliency in responding in that way rather than in a negative way?
So, it's interesting because to be there, to be home, to realize that, what I miss in my career and so forth, the resiliency was, to your point, was through the roof.
Yeah.
Because once I realized, I said, no, I'm not going out like
Yeah.
this. I know what I'm supposed to do now. I know what my calling is. I have a role. I was saved that day for a reason.
Yeah.
And I had to deal with taking all these meds. I had to deal with all these things, all of these sort of pitfalls that, believe me, guys and gals, as you go into your entrepreneurship journey, you're going to have your moments that can be easily, interpreted to say, nah, this isn't the time. And I refused. I refused to take that issue that I have and say that that's the way my book is written. And so I just, once again, just kept persevering and got off of each of those meds and all of these meds. And now I know how my patients feel when they're taking these meds sometimes. And to go through that journey with them. But yeah, the resiliency piece, and it's also being able to recognize that, sometimes at your lowest moment, you actually get some of the biggest findings and the biggest motivation when you really, really dig deep. And that's what ended up happening for me when I was there. I had a lot of time to think, had a lot of time to relearn myself, and to say, all right, what you going to do now about it? What are you going to do now about it? And you'll see that in your entrepreneurship journeys, as you will inevitably run into a couple of, you only see roadblocks when you're not focused on your journey.
Yeah, and I guess sometimes it just requires those kinds of profound events to give you the ability to reach down deep and really uncover sort of these foundational elements of who you are, right?
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you're just riding this high of wins and successes, right? Because it sounds like you've had a lot of success in your life, and maybe you lose touch with this aspect of, real struggle that you need to understand, right? To really fully become yourself. But you've uncovered another layer to all of this. So you've mentioned that you invested in a med company. And,
yeah. So, all right. So to your point, what I ended up doing, everyone, is that I started my concierge practice, and would take care of entertainers and athletes and so forth, almost exclusively in the beginning, to when I started to once again realize, how am I going to scale that? Around that same time, I ended up meeting a gentleman who was a producer, a TV producer. And then he says, Doc, you ever thought about TV? And I was like, TV? What are you talking? I'm just a doctor. What do you mean TV? You don't want to see me act, right? And so he's like, yeah. So next thing you know, I'm doing a segment here and there. And I'm doing this segment there. So I'm starting to take care of a lot of entertainers, as I mentioned before. And then I started doing different TV shows. I did The Doctors. I'm on CNN. I'm on Fox. And so all that to say, I started a medical media company. And the medical media company is focused on health and wellness. So there are some big box brands that I represent. I have a commercial running now, and I'm talking about the importance of different supplementation. There's a lot of things in our diet, and you guys are probably a healthier generation like mine, that you're recognizing that there's a lot of garbage in our food system, and that because we don't have as many nutrients, there is a need for vitamins for a lot of things. And so I represent those companies in wellness. And once again, I represent them TV, radio, and print. And so the fascinating thing is, like, I went to medical school and residency, guys. Never did I think I was going to have a couple of businesses and be doing this. But as most businesses, or some businesses, are driven out of need or necessity or scarcity almost. I just felt that something was missing, and I had to do something about it.
Yeah.
and I didn't think that I would ever be a doctorpreneur
Right.
in that case. But I was kind of driven there, and I'm grateful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was my experience. That sort of parallels my journey as well. Just a frustration that I experienced working, and it was something that nobody else was addressing. And so my first company was in response, right, to that frustration that I experienced. I think it's a very effective approach
Yeah.
to entrepreneurship because you have to understand real needs that exist in the market, and if you got personal experience with that, that's validation
Yeah.
that you're onto something,
True.
right?
True.
But also, and this has been a common theme throughout the day today, there are these serendipitous moments in your life that you can't plan for, maybe hard to explain. You run into someone that offers you an opportunity. All of a sudden, you're heading down a direction that you've never
That's
considered
right.
before,
That's
right?
right.
And so there's this value of just making those connections, being open to new ideas. And maybe you can speak to that aspect and how
Yeah.
that has
And so
impacted you.
one of the things, I teased with you guys before that an only child, I love to talk, but believe me, guys, it's important. It's very important as you are stepping out. Even if you're not necessarily the extrovert, it's okay. But it's all about connections, not a little bit, all about connections. So you've heard my story. I've been very blessed, very fortunate to have these companies. You know how it all really started? So when I was working, as I told you, with the farm workers, I liked to cook. So I went to a cooking class one night. I'm running my mouth. Oh, I'm a physician and I'm doing this and I'm very happy. I'm in this area. She's like, you need to meet someone. So as I was talking, she thought that I was funny. We had a good conversation. So she introduced me to the CEO of the hospital in Beverly Hills. All that happened with me running my mouth.
Yep.
If I had not serendipitously had that discussion in my fish class, I wouldn't have had 3 businesses.
Yeah.
And all I did was run my mouth
Yep.
and was able to meet someone who put me in with all of these entertainers, athletes to grow my business and so forth. And all of that was putting yourselves out there.
Man.
Putting yourselves out there. And you don't really always know, but like you said, that's why it's serendipity.
Yeah.
That you do that, and you just never know.
Yeah, really interesting. And there's a lot of effort you can do, like deliberately to network further, right? There are events you can attend, right? You can be very sort of conscious and deliberate and purposeful in doing that, which is so valuable, right?
Yeah.
In furthering your career, furthering your life, but yeah, really, really interesting. All right, so now you have this, I guess, a communications business.
Yeah.
And this is separate from this sort of practice that you've developed.
It is.
right?
It is. It's funny, because as I mentioned to you guys, there's one me. So I decided to kind of bring them in under one roof, in a sense, with different verticals, different lines of business. The other cool thing for all of you out there who are going this entrepreneurship route, I only started business school. You guys would get some of the training. I did a lot of on-the-job training. I kind of wish I was sitting there, maybe many moons, but evidently that wasn't my journey. But getting this sort of discussion and hearing all the other entrepreneurs you heard tonight, forget about it. I mean, this is such valuable information to really, really help you grow. More so than you can even imagine tonight. And so a lot of it really, as I say, is really putting yourself out there and making sure you're making as many relationships as you can.
Yeah. But then what I'm saying is that what you've done, you've established yourself as a professional with a particular expertise, which you'll all develop in whatever career path you head down, right? You will develop an expertise in whatever work that you're doing. But now you've figured out a new way to monetize that by creating a company that sort of packages that expertise into a product that you can sell. And I know that this is something that's been popularized like within like the entrepreneur influencers, right? This is a pathway that a lot of entrepreneurs can explore because we all have some expertise in something, right?
That's right.
And yeah, so
So you're right. So I'm an influencer for a couple of different companies. Once again, wouldn't have thought about that out of medical school either. And then also then just direct patient care. I have a consultancy now as well, where someone will have their own doctor, but I'm kind of on that side, giving some direction, giving some information back on labs that come back. My doctor's too busy. How can I help? So I figured out a couple of different verticals to utilize, my business, Redcross Communications, which evolved into more of a communication company when I started doing a lot more of the media part of what I do to grow my brand.
yeah, and so another thing that you're highlighting here is that I think people would be really surprised that once you start looking for deficiencies in the market, you begin to realize that they're everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right?
you just have to be awake. You just have to be watching.
That's right. And so this is part of a component that we sort of teach here in developing an entrepreneurial mindset. Part of that mindset is just paying attention, right? Paying attention to where the market failures are happening. And once you start paying attention, they're everywhere, right? And so
Yeah.
you have all of these opportunities to build on your core expertise.
You really do. So if someone kind of asks me in one line, so Doc, what do you really do? What is all this stuff that you're doing? I fill the gaps.
Yeah.
I fill the gaps within healthcare.
Yeah.
And those gaps have really come down to that access, convenience, and time that I told you about. But it's also the gap that is missing in what I think is the relationship in the room with the doctor, and that's trust, respect, to empathy, and communication. That's what I do. I fill gaps. I fill gaps within healthcare. And I've been fortunate and blessed enough to be able to build businesses by filling gaps. And so, to your point, those are the things that you guys are seeing, walking around, hearing, and listening. Listen out for those gaps.
Yeah.
Listen out to when someone says, "Oh my gosh, this is such a problem." When I hear those problems, it's like I lick my lips. I'm like,
Yeah,
lick
yeah,
my
yeah.
chops. I'm like,
That's exactly right.
So tell me a little bit more, like, because you'd be surprised what that can mean for you and your businesses in the future.
Yeah, right. The bad news is that the world is broken. I mean, it's so very broken. But the good news is that means there's tons of opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's just so much opportunity out there to fill those gaps.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So really, really interesting. And those gaps, it's not just within medicine that requires
No,
like a sophisticated
not at all.
expertise. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
Every field, every profession, every industry.
I'll say one thing. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No,
One
go
thing
ahead.
you mentioned when you said as far as it's being broken, right? Healthcare is a bit broken, here in the United States at the moment. And as an entrepreneur, one of the things, and I don't know if some of you as up and coming entrepreneurs will have some of the feelings that I had, but I went through a piece where I'm fixing things that are broken. I almost felt bad. Like, is this okay for me to monetize off of this? And it's a crazy thing because some of you will say, "What are you talking about? I'm trying to get rich." But that kind of wasn't my reason for this, right? It was making people's lives better. So I had to have a lot of internal dialogue to say, is it bad that I'm earning money? And that may sound silly, but it's important. And as I shared this with other entrepreneurs, some of them said the same thing, like, I get it. And what I have come up with, it's really conscious capitalism. Conscious capitalism where I still want to be there to make your life better, your family's lives better, but I have a family as well, and I would like to do well also. So, as you go through your journey, when you were talking about fixing things that are broken, because it's like, am I taking advantage? Am I doing this, that, and the other? But once again, after that internal dialogue, I said, no, Ken, you're okay. You're still on mission.
Yeah.
But you just needed to kind of understand yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and look, we live in a market system where this is how things are done, right?
Right.
And it's effective, right? There are problems with it, but again, conscious capitalism means you're making use of this market system
Yeah.
in a way that delivers good for the world, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
not a method of exploitation, right? Because you can use business in a way that is exploitative, that is harmful, right? But it doesn't have to be that way,
That's true.
right? And these are ethical decisions that you need to make. And I'm sure there's limits and boundaries on the way that you operate. And this is part of really the analysis that you have to go through as an entrepreneur, understanding where your moral compass is,
Yeah.
right? And also understanding, I mean, it's just a way of interpreting what you do as an entrepreneur. It's that, we have a system where you get compensated for improving the world, right?
Yeah.
And,
Exactly.
this is the way it works, right? And
It
it's okay
is.
to take advantage of that because this is how we move, society forward. And at the beginning of the semester of each of my courses, I talk about the value of entrepreneurship is you have the power to really, truly revolutionize the world, to change the world. In the past, all of that came through violence, right? It forced people to
Yeah.
do things a certain way. You conquered people to install a new way of life, right? But today, with markets, you can do all of that change without the violence,
That's true.
right? It's a voluntary exchange of value, right? Between actors. It's deeply flawed, right? There are definitely systemic issues,
Sure.
right? And unfairness to it. But at the end of the day, there's a moral good that's happening, and it's quite distinct from how change happens in the past. And I don't know. I mean, maybe you want to speak to how your values inform
Yeah.
some of the ways that you manage your
No, but
business.
you hit a very good point when you talk about the moral compass side of things of what you do in your business. So my business has evolved a bit, so it's not all just entertainers and athletes now. It's just folks who may be at a different price point or what have you that works for them. But I'm talking about the moral compass piece because there were certain entertainers or someone where their people called me and asked me, oh, well, sometimes they have a little bit of pain and it does better with this particular narcotic or something. And are you okay with that? Wink, wink. And it's going to be X amount of dollars, which is life altering. And you once again have to, and it is hard sometimes, but you really have to look within. And to your point of the moral compass, you start to realize, how money can be used. Look, I think of money as more of energy. When you talked about, I'm a big universe guy, so when you
Okay,
mentioned
okay, good.
I'm like crazy universed out. And so, for me, money is energy. I don't really worry about like the paper aspect of it. When energy is right and when I'm really dialed in, there's more
Yeah.
of it.
Yep, yep.
When I maybe get off course or do something that's not on my mission, there's less of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they're calling me and they're asking me, and you guys all see in the news, unfortunately, there was an entertainer to when a doctor gave something they shouldn't, and I've known other ones for other pop stars and so forth that I knew of and could have been in that situation. And I'm here to tell you, it never ever ends well for you.
Yeah.
Like not one, like ever ends well when you're not really staying on mission and on brand in a sense, and your moral compass.
Yeah, I mean, we have these cautionary tales with Michael Jackson,
And I
Prince,
knew all of that because
Chandler.
I was in LA at the
Yeah.
time, and I understood all that, and knew, and lo and behold, it unfortunately unraveled, and you hear these, and it'll probably won't be the last time either, because look, it's easier, right? It's easier to take the way out and so forth. But once again, if you stay on that ship, and that's why it's a moral compass, right? That compass is supposed to get you to your destination. And if you stay there, you will always win. You think you're not winning, but I'm promising you are.
Yeah, keeping on this, I am sure that the physicians in those positions never thought of themselves as, the type of person who's going to do whatever it takes to make
Oh,
as
yeah,
much money as
I know.
possible, right? And I know eventually someone's going to pay me enough. Like, they never think of themselves, but somehow they wound up there. So I wonder, what, and this could be a cautionary tale for anyone in business. At some point, you may be tempted by riches or something else, a good contract, a favorable deal, or whatever, that requires you to cross a moral boundary.
Mm-hmm.
How can you set up something within yourself to keep that compass, internal compass, strong so that that cross never happens?
A lot of that is honestly, guys, is knowing who
Mm,
you are inside.
mm,
Like I said, I was fortunate enough to find out a little bit early as far as what my calling was. So I knew like, yeah, taking care of that guy and writing that prescription probably isn't along my mission. I was
right.
able to do that. But you know, the other piece of it is just once again knowing yourself. And a lot of the things I would kind of lean on, and you know, as an only child, it's like, would my mom or dad be happy if I did this?
Yeah.
Would they be disappointed? And I'm a grown man, and I'm still thinking like that. But seriously, it just gets back to like, is that who you are? If you were caught in this situation, would you want that to really define who you are?
Yeah.
Would I have wanted everybody to say you're a crappy, terrible physician
Yeah.
because of that situation of helping him or her out? And so I think a lot about that. But once again, for me, and hopefully for some of you, if you decide to go that journey, whenever you figure out what your passion is, listen to your internal kind of dialogue. If it doesn't seem like it fits, it probably doesn't. And you have to learn to listen to yourself a bit.
Yeah, well said. I think that's great advice, and then also like articulate, what it is that you stand for, right? I mean, if you're passionate about
Hmm.
something, right, to what ends are you willing to go to achieve that, right? And what are your limits,
Hmm.
right? And if you don't sort of think through what those sort of guardrails are. You'll be presented with a situation and you don't know how to act, and
It's true.
you make a small decision in the wrong direction, and you're heading sliding down a slippery slope. Um, yeah, so problems to be avoided,
Yeah.
and so I like to go in another direction now. So returning back to I, the creation of some of these businesses.
Hmm.
So we know that there was an event in your life that was like this seminal event that really changed who you are, and so you started thinking about things, I guess, differently,
Hmm.
and maybe really starting to pay attention to what people value. And that was, I guess, the impetus for beginning down this entrepreneurial journey. Um, but that's still not the same as taking that first step.
Hmm.
I wonder if you can speak to what it took for you to take that very
Wow.
first step.
No, that's a great question too. And you know, sometimes, as with anything, and like you said, we talk about the universe. Sometimes it just plainly has to be luck.
Mm,
I mean, when I was coming out, when I was still in New York and trying to say that there had to be a better way to take care of patients and to be happy, I just really got to my wits end when I said that I was in roles of leadership a lot, so I was able to see how they ran the business. I was later able to say if I was running the business, I would do it this way. And so what I decided to do was I just kind of, took my shield off the wall and said that I was going to open my own business, my own practice initially.
okay.
Now, that was very difficult if you look at what healthcare is now because, my colleagues are joking around and call me the unicorn because there are no docs who practice by themselves. Everyone's in a group. Everyone is kind of in that conglomerate because they have to be.
Mm,
And the luck part came from me, everyone, is that I had people who followed me from the other practice. Now, it wasn't enough for me to continue that particular model. So
mhm,
that's why I ended up, really shifting over to the concierge model. But I was fortunate that that I resonated enough, that my message resonated enough, and that our time together was important enough for them to say, we'll go with this guy. We'll follow him. I even have patients to this day, 20 years ago, that reach out to me from LA and still say, well, God, I miss you as a doctor. I still can't find anyone that listens and that sort of thing, which is bananas if you really think about it.
yeah.
And so with that, a little bit of luck because I don't think I realized like how difficult it was
Yeah.
what I did.
Yeah.
But I was once again just very, very fortunate, and that once again my message resonated, and once again my passion was palpable for them.
Yeah. So, all right. So, maybe a little ignorance mask. some of
Very,
the
very.
struggle.
Look, you're being nice. A lot of ignorance.
Yeah. So, that could be a good thing.
And exactly,
Yeah.
that can sometimes be a good thing. You know, there is this. Where does this come from, guys? It was one of these one of these spiritual books, the universe books that I like to read, talked about somebody was on the board and they were trying to solve some math equation which has never been solved. Somebody came into the room and thought it was homework. So he ended up taking down the problem and going home and solving it. Brought it back. It's like, how did you solve it? Well, he wasn't as ignorant as at the time, or
That's right.
let's not say dumb. Let's just say didn't know that you didn't know what you didn't know.
Yeah, and the same effect happens like with the speed of runners, right? Like I don't know the data on this. Maybe some of the athletes here can speak to this. But there was like, what is it, the something mile, 4-minute mile, or whatever it was, and it wasn't until someone broke that
It started.
Yeah, people saw that this is
Yeah.
a possibility.
There you
right?
go. Perfect.
You can do it, and then now those records constantly
Absolutely.
get broken, and so it's not until you can see that it's achievable. So people go in there with these sort of preconceived notions and barriers that prevent us from achieving all that we can. I can go on. I want to leave enough space for some questions. So does anyone in the audience have a question? And we have a microphone that's going to go around.
Okay, let's go in the back.
That time in your life when you said you had a heart attack.
Yep.
That was because of stress.
That was totally due to stress. So to your point,
So do you think, like, it's because you felt like you were losing control of things?
absolutely. I thought I was doing what I was supposed to. It was all me and the businesses, and I needed to get more businesses. Luckily, when they looked, I didn't end up having the typical heart attack that I see in my office when there's a clot that blocks the artery. My heart muscle had been damaged by the stress hormones, adrenaline. So my heart muscle was actually damaged at the time. So absolutely out of control. Just didn't realize it. I mean, look at me. I'm running in the ER and I'm telling them, give me an X-ray. I think I just have a pneumonia,
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
headed to
wild.
the plane.
Interesting.
Okay, yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what you guys referenced a little bit earlier about the personal brand, right? So an entrepreneur has an idea, develops it, but they have to go out there, they have to talk about it, they have to publicize it.
Yep.
And eventually people not only responding to the idea, but they are responding to who that person is and what they represent. So could you please share a little bit about building your personal brand and the effort to do that?
Look, I was a little bit lucky here, guys, because my last name being Redcross kind of helps a nice brand. That's free, a little free. I'll tell you all a story later about the Red
And you
Cross
have a medical
if we get to it.
briefcase for a business
Oh, I
card,
do.
if I
I'll
remember.
give you guys exactly. I'll give
Yes.
you guys one of my business cards, which is my doctor bag that you mentioned here, that I fold up for you and
yeah.
give you one because I make house calls. So for me, in fact, thanks Mary Saul for bringing that up.
Yeah.
See, that's why she gets the big bucks. That's why I see.
Oh, that's right.
So here, guys, this is my business card. So it's my doctor bag because part of my other business vertical, I guess, I would say also, is I make house calls. So I just made a house call earlier yesterday right here in town. And so for me, that personal brand, to your point, stands out. When I go to these conferences, some people have come up to me and they were like, I'm like, are you Dr. Rick? I'm like, yeah, how are you? Doing okay? He's like, no, I'm good, but do you have another one of those business cards? Like, I get so much business from them. So the main thing that I learned as far as for my branding is what can I stand out to be the most unique? So fine, luckily the last name helps as well. That business card took me probably a year and a half to figure out what I can do that was 3D and that was really going to really stay and resonate when I left. So that when I leave cards, even with you guys, somebody's like, dude, this card is like the best.
Yeah.
When I also think about branding, I also try to think of things that I want people, when they think of me, that'll resonate with them. Like the main thing I'd want to leave, and I do that before I do any talk or before I do any kind of meeting, what do I want to leave? I want you all to feel hopefully like okay, he's real. He means what he says. If I can leave that with you guys thinking that you can really pick up the phone and have a discussion with me, it's the best. One of the best things when I'm doing different TV shows, especially before COVID, one of the best times I ever had in my career is that I'm in Phoenix, and I'm in the airport, and somebody says, "Hey, Dr. Redcross," some dude, don't know him. And I'm walking, I'm like, "Hey, how are you?" He's like, "Dude, are you coming on the news today?" I was like, "I'll be on in a couple of hours." He says, "Man, I'd grab a beer with you." Now, look, I'm not a beer drinker, but the point is what that meant to me was exactly what I want to leave everywhere I go. Like, yo, he's cool, he'll listen, and he really means it, and he'll be there for me. So when you're building your brand, those are the little pieces that I like to leave so that they know that it's synonymous with whatever it is I do.
And it's intentional. All of this is intentional.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's another question over here. Here you go, Jaden.
How you doing? My name is
Hey,
Jaden.
Jaden, how are you?
I'm doing good. So you spoke about your personal brand, right, and how important that is. When it comes to what your patients feel, would you agree with they feel a sense of exclusivity with you and a sense of better treatment?
I do, and thank you for that question. And I do because, I mean, I give them time. Like if I'm sitting there, Jacob, and you and I are just meeting, and we're talking one on one. I'm like, okay, well, good to meet you, and thank you for your question, and all right. But anyway, be well, all right. As opposed to me saying like, what made you think about this? You have brothers and sisters. Who's your favorite sports team? I mean, when you're doing that, you feel like you actually have. I always say a doctor should feel like a member of your family. That's the way it should be. And so, yeah, and so when I thought about that, and for the book that I wrote before, I tried to think about what are the 4 things that I think are really important to patients. And that was why I mentioned trust. You and I are talking here. I would hope that if we talked about something private after this, that you would trust that I'd keep it to myself. Respect, because I'm respecting you now, making sure that you and I are eye to eye, making sure that we're having the communication which we're having now. All of those things are really important. And so that's the part that I like to impart when we talk about brand and what I think all of my patients feel. I'm lucky, like I said, when I get someone calling from LA and all these places so many years later, I just feel very grateful because I was able to once again kind of live out my mission.
And as my second question, just as a doctor and your expertise and all the ups and downs you've been through, coming from a doctor, what would you say are the absolutely red flags that you would not do as a person, or products that you wouldn't use, or things that you wouldn't, activities that you wouldn't involve yourself in fear of getting hurt or anything like that?
All right, well, a couple of things. So look, I mean, guys, you're going to hear the normal company line when you're in college, obviously drugs and alcohol, but I'm being real. I know, some of you are going to live. I get that. But just recognizing that, that there's later problems that can kind of develop from them as well. And then the other piece is something that I probably wouldn't have talked about before COVID, but it's the mental health piece. It's the mental health piece that luckily, I think with your generation, it's a little bit easier to talk about those things when back when I was in this, you couldn't really talk about that. So I would say one of the bigger things is that if you're feeling like, things are challenged or you're having a hard time, and even in this business world, look, it's even becoming important for my business. So right now, this is the all-time high for physician suicide. So here it is. Physicians go to school. Everyone thinks physicians are all rich. They're happy. Why would that be? Well, a lot of physicians, when we go to school, it's 10 years of school. It's kind of not cool to say, hey, this is hard. This is challenging. I don't know what I should do here. So there's a lot of holding things within that aren't coming out. So that's what I would say now. It's that mental health piece that's important. And, of course, the importance of, drugs and alcohol. You're welcome, man.
Anyone else?
In regards to entrepreneurship, marketing, or business, are there any books that stand out to you that you would recommend for other students like myself?
Oh, wow. Well, that's a really good question. So I'll tell you this, because like I said, it's interesting because I'm kind of self-made, right? Because I wasn't lucky like you guys to have a class. But a couple of things that I do. One is the Strengths Finder. It's not a marketing book, but the Strengths Finder is a book that you'll take. You'll take a test. The important thing there is that it's going to identify your strengths. Huge. I use that now, 20 years later, to kind of know where I should be kind of focusing. The other one is your working genius. That's another sort of testing. The way I use that is kind of realizing through my business, what are some things that are my working genius? In other words, things that I kill. Two of them for me are enablement, meaning I'm pretty good at sitting down with you guys and us having a discussion and me really focusing to help you get to where you want to get to. The second thing that is my working genius is galvanizing. So if we got a plan, I'm here to get you guys hyped to say, you got this. We can do this. But then there's also some working deficiencies. I'm not a fan of like operations. Like putting this stuff together, man, I'd rather farm that out and that sort of thing. So I would say that because those things kind of helped me on the marketing side to kind of let me know what I should be doing and what I shouldn't be doing and why I was so frustrated. It took a minute for me to get to business and say, why have I not moved anywhere? And I didn't realize that they weren't really my working geniuses at the time.
Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome, man.
Anyone else? Okay.
Hey, my name is Christian.
Hey,
and
Christian, good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. And I have a question on regards to like AI. So, what kind of role do you think AI will play in your job as a physician?
Oh, that's a great question. You know, it's so funny you asked that, Chris. So I just talked to my best friend who is not a medical person, but was talking about AI from some stuff he wanted to do with what I do on the concierge side. And the question I always get is, will that replace doctors, right? Will that make a better diagnosis and that sort of thing? But I get back to that other piece that we talked about before. Nothing replaces the human touch. Nothing replaces, me being able to see that I'm talking to you now, but your eyes are blinking more because you're a little nervous, or you're doing this because you're concerned about something. AI can't do that. AI can spit out a couple of things here and there. It's almost like talking to Dr. Google. I was joking around because I was doing this particular show. We were talking about berberine. Berberine is a natural herb that's been shown to help with blood sugar, of whether that's nature's Ozempic. You guys know Ozempic, the weight loss drug? And so once again, they talk a lot about Dr. Google, right, which is now Dr. AI, I guess. And it's not you. That's the thing. You can see all these symptoms, say, oh my gosh, I have that. And then you go to the doctor's office and you don't have it. And so I don't think anything replaced the touch. Now, AI does a lot of wonderful things as far as organization, as far as structure and that sort of thing. And it's a tool that's being used a little bit more, well, I shouldn't say a little bit, a lot more in healthcare. But I don't think it's going to kind of replace that special touch that's necessary to really feel like someone's got your back.
So I have a comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So I learned a lot about you today. I think your brand is personalized medicine.
Yeah.
And there was something else you talked about, that moral compass and what's that spiritual economics, right? That you have that faith that somehow you are going to make that choice of not taking that patient that maybe wants to do something that really isn't legitimate or it's illegal, and saying, no, I know that maybe I'm going to miss that opportunity and that payment, but it's going to resurface another way.
True.
And so it's really important because I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, we need to have that faith that, you know what, maybe that's not going to work out, but know that I'm going to hang in there and be patient. Something else will surface that's true to me. Mm-hmm. So that was really interesting what you were talking about. But I also want to mention the Affordable Care Act because I wish more doctors were like you. And I think sometimes we think, okay, great, now everyone has access to medicine. But the problem is that when this all happened, a lot of patients ended up seeing nurse practitioners instead of doctors.
Right.
Because not all doctors accepted it.
That's true.
And that's the downside to this, and that's why it's so complicated. But I think, what are your thoughts about, these doctors perhaps finding a different way to be able to maybe take your approach, that personalized medicine, really caring about patients, and saying, maybe I won't get paid through Medicare or insurance right away, but maybe an alternate path to getting paid.
Well, I'll say one of the bigger challenges is you're right. The way healthcare is right now, it's really rewarding you for volume instead of value. That's one issue. The other thing that I go through that's always tough for me is that I try to balance the patients I take care of that are the entertainer athletes, and then other people, the ACA, who may be a different price point, how I can give that way. So I try and do both because it's hard to straddle the line. But the other thing you're starting to see, as you mentioned, is that doctors are in a way becoming a little bit of a commodity where they will replace you with a nurse practitioner, which is fine. Nurse practitioners are great. They know a lot, but our training is different. It's different for a reason. And so when you think about different ways to deliver healthcare, you're seeing a little more personalization, but you're not seeing it in the large value market for those who aren't at the concierge sort of level. And so that's the problem we're seeing. You're seeing, I think Amazon will deliver your care now. I don't know if that's the best way to go, guys. You can, get a pair of earplugs, but I don't know if you want them to diagnose you. But the point is that there's all these different delivery models that you guys are going to be inundated with. But at the end of the day, you just want to make sure that when you're having your healthcare interaction with whatever that is, that you're actually seeing eye to eye and realizing that we are not there if you're not there, like at all. And so that's the important thing to always recognize, that when you go in there and you pay your copay, or your parents pay your copay, or what have you, you've made a contract. You've made a contract to say, Doc, I'm supposed to be satisfied when I leave here.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
John, you had a question.
Can you have a class of undergrads, and you mentioned that you haven't necessarily, you were not taught entrepreneurship, when you were 20, but it was
Right.
a discovery that
Fell into it, yeah.
you fell into it. So, how would you advise the students right now who are like in their 20s, who are getting exposed to this level of information, the tools that they have, how privileged they are in a sense, and what you would advise them to pursue and focus on?
Yeah, I'd ask you guys to ask. I'd ask you guys, but I would ask you guys to ask a lot of questions, just like that we're doing now. Look, this is one of the best ways to learn. Look, I just found out today that I didn't know there were so many speakers before me. And so, I mean, all of these things, all of these notes that you hopefully took, or at least some mental notes, because we're telling you a lot of the things that we've done, that we've gone through, and some of the mistakes we've made. And so, and to let you know also, well, I'm at least here to tell you that it's okay to make mistakes. Even now, this far into my practice, I'll go through this mental thing about, am I as successful as I should be? And this is a personal thing, everyone, that I'll do. One of the things one of my mentors will say, you need to take time to think. You really need to take time and think. Think about that. When do you really? I have it on my calendar to where I'll put it on my calendar to have think. 30 minutes, 40 minutes, where I'm just sitting there. When I'm just thinking about, is my business where it should be? Should I be doing this differently? Is there something else I should create? Should I get rid of something that's making my life tough? So if there's anything, like you said, a young undergrad and looking at someone who fell into entrepreneurship, it would be understanding the value of thinking and asking a lot of questions.
I do the same. I make time out of my day to think. It's my favorite part of the
Yep.
day.
Yep.
Yeah, so much happens
Totally.
during those moments. Yeah, definitely.
But now we have phones, right? And everybody's like consuming 5 seconds of video as a way of spending time.
I know, but the good thing, we have the phone so we can put it on our calendars. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's interesting. One of the things I'm experimenting with is even what I do. Am I able to kind of give you guys in 5 seconds, good health information, or what I call a Redcross minute or something like that, to make sure that we all resonate. So you guys say, yeah, it's kind of important to me. One of the things I do, I was mentioning to some of the athletes in here, I work with a group who helps athletes who are finishing up their careers or during their careers become entrepreneurs. And it's because all they've known all their lives is the sport. Now they've, either had an injury or they've retired out, and now they want to get into entrepreneurship. And luckily, they have a name and a brand, which is good as well to be able to start with as well. But once again, until you kind of put it out there and really start to look at around you at some of the things we mentioned before, where there's voids for you to fill or gaps to fill. That'll really help you grow as an entrepreneur as we talk about that now for the undergrads.
Yeah, and even for the athletes here, I mean, they may not have the same visibility as a professional athlete, but you have a platform that you can take advantage of.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, it doesn't matter. So these particular athletes, fine, they're established athletes and so forth. Some of them are, athletes that I didn't necessarily know where they were in their sport. Some of them are women's soccer players, and not even of the larger league, the smaller league. Doesn't matter. Yeah. You have a platform. Right. You have a platform as athletes that a lot of people would love to be around, learn from.
That's right.
That sort of thing. So absolutely. So don't get into, I have this and this, that, and the other, and I have this many followers, whatever. You have your followers.
Yeah.
And that's what I want you to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. Other questions?
Anyone else with questions? Don't be shy. All right,
more.
great.
Or another one.
So my name is Anthony.
Hey, Anthony.
You had mentioned that you had an issue with the Red Cross organization.
I did.
I was wondering if you could talk.
You're gonna get this on video, Anthony. Huh? Look at Anthony. You got me last. So as I told you, I was fortunate and blessed enough to have some things on TV that were running and so forth. And one day, I received a 13-page cease and desist letter. And I thought it was one of my fraternity brothers that had way too much time on his hands. And unfortunately, it was the American Red Cross that sent me a letter that says, you are not allowed to use Red Cross on any of your TV shows. That's funny. Any of the stuff you're doing. I was like, you got to be kidding me, right? And so luckily, I have a family historian who thought it was cool that there was a Red Cross name, so she researched. First Red Cross was in 1787. John, who is Native, and Lucy, who is African American. You see the little 1700 writing and all of that. So I had to prove that to the American Red Cross. They authenticated it, but they said, whatever, dude, we bought your name. And so I dealt with them legally for not too long because obviously, battling a big corporation like that. So it's one of those things, and it slowed up my business. My business at that time was really booming with the company that I was with. It was really booming at that time. And so they got scared off by the American Red Cross. And then through my attorneys, I learned a lot about them as a kind of a corporation that, that maybe some of the good they do may not be as great and so forth. So I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there. But the point is, I learned a lot. I learned a lot during that time for my business because it taught me that I kind of need to be prepared to pivot for things that I don't see. Like, I thought it was over. I mean, it was everywhere, things we were doing and everything was really moving along. But what do I do now? What do you do now when your business takes a shift like that and you're like, okay, what do I have to do from here? And so while I'm not happy it happened, but I am grateful for kind of how it made me pivot a little bit to get to where I am now. But thank you, Anthony, for the question.
What was the resolution? What was?
So after a while, I mean, I because of what I do and people that I know in the industry, they were a lot of great people in this industry who were ready to make this New York Times stuff. Yeah. Red Cross against poor Dr. Red Cross. Of course. But I didn't, honestly, with my family, I didn't want the stuff coming from them, the misleading story, stuff that was going to take place. So we ended up just negotiating some domain change. I had to change some website stuff. Unfortunately, that particular business is defunct. because of them being a little scared off and so forth. So look, it was very, very unfortunate. It's kind of that, that thing about big business and knowing what you want your business to be known for.
Yeah.
A lot of people who know what I went through and kind of how it went has a different impression and have a different impression, and they shared a lot with me. But once again, it just as I on the spiritual side sit there with the universe and say, why did this particular thing happen? Once again, I was able to pivot a bit. I was able to adjust some things. And was able to grow from it. Whichever way, for whatever reason, that was supposed to be a part of my journey.
Yeah, it's probably disappointing to, it sort of shatters your view that you have these big institutions whose sole purpose is to do good.
Right.
Right?
And I donate blood to them.
Right, exactly.
I donate blood to these guys who sued me.
Exactly.
And I'm like, you get no more Red
Do you
Cross
still
blood.
donate blood? You still do?
No more. What? They get no more Red Cross blood. And I hope no more. Well, I'm okay. I won't go there, guys. My point is that, yeah, we're in different businesses, right? But that's when I realized, and who knows, Anthony, maybe this is what I realized. Look, businesses are not always what you think. And I don't want my business to ever be that way, the Red Cross showed me. So maybe that was why it was part of my journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
More spiritual economics.
There you go. Never go wrong with spiritual economics.
All right, any last questions? We want to leave a little time to.
Yeah.
Right. All right, then we will just wrap it up here because I want
All
to
right.
leave a little time so maybe you can connect with some of the students.
Sure.
But everyone, please.
Yeah,
give
thank
Dr.
you. This was so inspirational.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We had other speakers, but you're just the opening act. You're our headline.
All right. But honestly, and before I go, seriously, I know this is the end of your day, everyone, but I want to thank you guys for just coming out, hearing this. I don't know. I hope something resonates with you guys somehow. I don't know if you guys are LinkedIn people or Instagram people, whatever, but feel free, and I really mean this, to reach out, ask questions. Don't worry, it's free. It's free for you guys only. But really, I want to thank you for listening because I didn't get this opportunity, and I want you guys to really think about this and realize you're being set up for success in this program. I've made a lot of mistakes that maybe I wouldn't have made if I had the training that you guys have an opportunity. And when I say guys, I mean gals too, so forgive me. But the point is I didn't have this opportunity. And so think about it as something like, this may be the first spoke in the wheel of my success. So thank you guys too for your time tonight.
Yeah, well said. Thank you so much. Yes. All right, yeah, so we'll end it here.
Yeah, we'll end it here, and please stick around. Yes.